Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. This season, it's all grit. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take a look at the coaching changes upon the Detroit Lions. We'll talk about the comings and goings, discuss how this could affect the team, and discuss the impact, of course, moving forward. We'll also get to Dan Miller's insights on the process as well. All of that and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hi, this is Billy Sims, and you listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Angers, a former Michigan High School Coach of the Year and Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's also the Scouting and Training Director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, good to have you here to talk about coaching.
Nothing better than coaching. I'm just going to say that right now. Hopefully I can help out.
All right, I appreciate that. In case you can't, I've got a member of the media here who can help weigh in on the coaching search and the coaching changes. That is James Cook, the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle. James, good to have you here as part of this as well.
I have zero coaching experience of a practical nature.
Which makes you an expert.
That's right. Yeah.
So, all in jest. Guys, in our last episode, we recapped the 2024 season. We talked about some great memories, some great moments from that season. But almost immediately as the season ended, changes started happening. And obviously, we're talking coaching changes, of course. You know, right away, we already talked about Ben Johnson leaving as offensive coordinator. That was pretty much expected. We knew Aaron Glenn was going to get a shot. He got an opportunity to go to the New York Jets. He is going to be the head coach there. So both of those guys are head coaches. Other guys who are leaving, Antoine Randall L. was our wide receivers coach. He is now gone. He is the wide receivers coach and assistant head coach for the Chicago Bears. Joining him and Ben Johnson is J.T. Barrett, who was our quarterback coach. Terrell Williams, a guy that was highly praised by the defensive line, is now a defensive coordinator in New England. So those are all the guys that have left us. Now, a couple of those positions have been filled, and one guy who isn't leaving, which is good news, is offensive lineman Hank Fraley. I believe one of the offensive linemen threatened to sabotage any interview he had because he couldn't imagine not working with Hank. And so we're glad to have him back. Of course, the two positions everybody has been looking for is what's going to happen with the offensive and defensive coordinators. Well, a name very familiar to Lions fans should be Kelvin Sheppard, the linebacker coach. He has been promoted to defensive coordinator. And the new offensive coordinator comes by way of Denver in John Morton, who was the passing game coordinator in Denver last year. Now, he has been in Detroit before, and no, I'm not talking about Johnny Morton, the wide receiver from back in the day. This is John Morton. Similar name, but different person and different spellings. So there's some coaching changes. And as we talked about it, guys, it's a bummer to have this happen, but it's not a bummer because it means you're good, right? I mean, we used to have this shakeup in the past because the team was so bad. So, James, let's start with the coordinator positions. Let's start with the offensive coordinator because Ben Johnson got a lot of credit for building this offense up. He was one of the hottest names, if not the hottest name in coaching this offseason. The Lions are replacing him with John Morton. Talk to us a little bit.
Well, interesting enough, John Morton did play wide receiver in the NFL for a little bit. When he played in the NFL in like the mid-90s. He bounced around on practice squads mostly as an undrafted free agent out of Western Michigan. So he does have a wide receiver background that he brings to the table. Comes from the Detroit area. Like I said, played at Western Michigan, had a cup of coffee in the NFL for 2 seasons. Bounced around on practice squads quite a bit. I think he was on practice squads for I can't remember, a decent number of teams here. I think Raiders, Packers, Jaguars, and then played in the CFL as well for the Toronto Argonauts. So he's got some experience as a player but he's got a boatload of experience as a coach. Overlapped with Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn for a year in New Orleans. So he's part of the Sean Payton coaching tree. He coached again last year with Sean Payton as the quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator with the Broncos. Also overlapped a little bit with Ben Johnson for a year because in 2020 he was a senior offensive assistant with the Detroit Lions. So Dan Campbell obviously very familiar with him. Last season, the Denver Broncos were one of the kind of darlings of the Cinderella story a little bit of the NFL. I mean, they started out pretty bad their first few games, and then really came on as their rookie quarterback was really helped being molded into an NFL player by Morton. So, and I think Bo Nix is kind of a lot like Jared Goff as far as a player. He doesn't have the Matthew Stafford cannon of an arm. He's got the Jared Goff arm, which can make all the throws, but it isn't the Matthew Stafford arm. And Bo Nix was a little bit more of a runner, obviously, than Goff was, but a pretty similar quarterback package, really. So I think it was an interesting hire in that regard too.
Yeah, you're right. John Morton was a senior offensive assistant in 2022 with the Lions. And so they did have that 1 year where Dan Campbell knows him already. Uh, Coach, you know, a couple things here. Ben Johnson said the runway's been built. He felt like the work he was going to do was done. Um, but that being said, the Lions didn't promote from within here. They brought somebody from the outside. But I think it should be well noted that the guy they brought in from the outside was already here before. So let's just look at that aspect from coaching. How important is it that it's a known quantity? I mean, only because what they were doing was so good, or is that overblown? What do you see from this move?
It's hard. I mean, you want to promote within, but he was here, and he has, he's crossed paths with these guys. He helped out, a couple of our coaches back in the day. Campbell had mentioned that. I don't know if you guys saw that quote about him and it wasn't Montgomery, our pass game guy. Oh my God, Drew Blank.
Tanner
Tanner,
Engelstad?
thank you, Jesus. Yeah,
Engelston? I
Tanner
got
learned a
you.
ton from him when he was here. Campbell had mentioned that. He talked about that back in the day. So I think that's a big help. James made some good points in what he did for Denver this year. And I think here's the other thing too. Dan Campbell mentioned about a week ago when he said he was going to find an offensive coordinator that Jared Goff would be part of that finding, that Jared Goff would have a say in it. So it must be a good guy. I mean, if Jared Goff likes him and from the past. So I think we're in good shape. Again, comes from Peyton's tree. Dan Campbell comes from Peyton's tree. They love the short pass game. They love the run game. They turn the quarterbacks in. So, I'm looking forward to it. And the key with that is if we keep him and we keep the other two, we don't lose any of our assistants on that. That's a huge part, which hopefully we're selling to them. Stay in here, get this. You'll probably either have this job or you'll be promoted a year or two from now. And I think that's a bonus. So we're just changing, we're changing Ben Johnson's, young looking face to a guy that's been around for a while. And I kind of like, he looks good. Actually looks like an offensive line coach. So I'm kind of fired up about that.
All right, well, I hope you're complimenting him on his look, because if not, I'm going to let you deliver that message to him
No,
about the young face.
hey, I never question anybody's looks. You guys see me.
All right, James, you brought up some great information about John Morton. And, Coach brought up the fact that, hey, these other coaches that didn't get promoted, I mean, you said this before, James, there's no salary cap on coaches. They could get a raise without a promotion if the Lions wanted to, just to keep them there, right?
Yeah, yeah, and they did keep a lot of their assistants. I was thinking that Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson would maybe poach a few more assistants than they did. So I think that's a good sign for the Lions that a lot of these assistants stayed with Detroit. And going back to Morton, he's got a lot of experience. I mean, this guy has been a coach in the NFL for 25 years. He started with the Raiders as a low-level offensive assistant back in 1998, worked his way up through four different four different titles with the Raiders, eventually becoming the tight ends coach. He's been wide receiver coach and passing coordinator at a bunch of stops. He has that tight ends coach thing. He's been an offensive coordinator at two different stops, one with USC and one with the Jets for a year. So he's got a variety of skills and has been able to pick up things from a lot of different good coaches over the years. I mean, at USC, he worked for Pete Carroll. He worked obviously with Sean Payton when recently with the Broncos. Worked with the Lions, most of the Lions coaching staff a couple years ago. So he's got a pretty varied coaching experience, and I think that's going to serve him well as an offensive coordinator, as a guy who's been a receivers coach, a tight ends coach, a coordinator, just all those levels of coaching on the offensive side of the ball.
That makes a lot of sense. And obviously, you talked about he was working with Bo Nix as part of that coaching staff in Denver, and you saw, him improve as well. James, are you concerned that the offensive coordinator that the Lions now have, it doesn't have any offensive coordinator experience?
Well, he does have some. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was an offensive coordinator for a season with the New York Jets in 2017.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and he was the offensive coordinator for 2 years at USC under Pete Carroll.
You're right.
Um,
You're right.
So but most of his experience is not as an offensive coordinator. It's mostly as a position coach, or just as an offensive assistant, just in general. But he does have some experience calling plays. So I think and those are the things too. He's got so many stops that he's got to have just picked up things a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit from this coach, a little bit from this coach. He's got a lot of different varying backgrounds to really draw stuff from.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm not concerned because I think back to the first season when Anthony Lynn was here and things had to get made mid-season and Dan Campbell just started calling plays and he was running parts of the offense. And that's where I'm I'm not as concerned as maybe some people are because Dan Campbell's always been involved with this offense. And he and Ben Johnson and Jared Goff have all worked together. And so because of that, I'm like not so concerned about that this might not be the hottest name out there. Although, you ask some people who know that, that he does come highly regarded. But coach, thoughts on that? And also the fact that they've lost two other assistants on offense, does that play a role in things?
I mean, everything does. There's going to be a learning curve, but I think the big thing is if you keep the guys that we still have in the house, everything's going to go over a little smoothly. I think the biggest thing is, Dan Campbell talked about that everybody has a say, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or defense side of the ball. Everybody has their input. Hank's going to be the run game coordinator. Okay. Well, he's going to know, dude, on 3rd and 3, we can hit them, and I mean, if you get to the one coordinator position that wants to control everything, I don't think you're as successful. And I think that's what the big thing is. They're gonna do it by committee, and they're gonna put things together. And hopefully we can get a good quarterback and a couple good running backs and a couple good wide receivers and a decent tight end and a offensive line with them so that he's successful.
It makes your job a little bit easier as a coordinator when you've got those guys. And right. We're looking at filling roles and being concerned about things we haven't been concerned about as Lions fans because we've been more concerned about, do we have the personnel on the field, James, to get the job done? And we know we've got the personnel. What we've got, we'll get into the players and stuff, in another episode of who's coming back and how you're going to build the roster. But with all those extensions this offseason, so many people are already coming back. Any other thoughts on, the offensive side of the ball here and the coaching changes going on?
Yeah, keeping Hank Fraley as the offensive line coach is huge. When Dan Campbell came here, Taylor Decker pounded the table and said, "We need to keep this guy on staff." In this time, he had interviews with the offensive coordinator job for Seattle, and I think it was Penny Sewell who said, "I don't want anybody else as my offensive line coach. We need to keep this guy." Um, those kind of things with players just going to bat for him says, speaks volumes. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, there's still a couple of position coaches to fill and maybe some guys that move around or move up a little bit. too. With Engstrand and Scotty Montgomery, where they fit into this, and replacing JT Barrett as assistant quarterbacks coach, and maybe there's been some rumor that Mark Brunell might go to the Jets too with Aaron Glenn, but that isn't something that's been official yet, one way or the other. So there still could be a little bit of tweaking on the offensive side of the ball, and then obviously there's a good amount of movement on the defensive side of the ball as well.
For sure, that there obviously could still be some movements, and you're right. I was double checking. It was Frank Ragnow that was the guy who joked about sabotaging the interview processes just to keep him there. And if he did it, great. And if not, that's okay too. I like that he put it out there because it showed the love that they have for them. And you're right. Mark Brunell could go somewhere else. So there will be some other guys coming in. It might be people the Lions have experience with, whether it's from here or at previous stops. Coach, any other thoughts on the offensive side of the ball, coaching changes, anything like that? Because then I got one more question for you about it as well.
Yeah, no, I think we're good, and again, it'll shape itself out, and they have coaches can meet anytime they want, players
Yeah,
can't.
yes, they can. Yep.
And you know what? You're going to be burning the candle at both ends. Like I said a couple shows ago, my hand's up. If they need somebody to come down and help, I'm in.
So, Coach, share a little insight on this. Every offseason, even if you keep the same guys, your offense is always evolving, right? Because even through the season, you evolve. Are you changing the verbiage a lot, a little? How does that adjust from one season to the next? Because you obviously have to keep it, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you what you have to do. You give me some insights.
Well, the thing is you're not going to change much of it. I'm sure they have their different calls and stuff like that. The base is going to be the same. These guys coming in now, the new guy coming in, he's probably got some, hey, I want to call this, this formation this, or I want to call this. But once you get that established, then what you do is everything's basic. It's all about eye candy after that. And the Lions use a ton of eye candy where they're moving parts all the time. And so I think that's one of the things that you'll see. It'll be interesting to see. I know everybody right now is going, "Oh my God, Ben Johnson's gone, and aren't we going to see any more trick plays?" I don't know, but I know we're still going to see fourth down plays. And so, and Hank's got that. I mean, I bring up something too, even with Randall L last year. I know a couple of those trick plays, those were designed when Randall were similar to what Randall L ran when he was playing in the NFL. So now he's gone. So they're all gonna have their little, and with as much as those guys are bouncing around, picking up stuff from different people. And I think we have the younger guys in there to get the Madden game involved, because that's where I think all these new offense coordinators learn all these plays is playing Madden. That they're still going to touch base with that, but I don't see much changing much, especially with how he's coming in, and he's been under Peyton's tutelage also, where Dan Campbell was. So a lot of that stuff's going to be the same.
That makes a lot of sense. And maybe you just shed some light on the reason I did not become an offensive coordinator. I was playing Tecmo Bowl. There were only 4 plays to choose from, and you couldn't customize stuff so much. There were no hot routes back then. And so maybe I was just, the video games hadn't caught up with the teaching tool back then. Well, hey, let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball. And, Coach, you reminded me the Lions have actually already replaced their defensive line coach, right? They got Casey Rogers. He was the run game coordinator in Tampa, Coach. You want to share a little bit more about him?
Well, he's got 30 years of experience. Dan Campbell has crossed paths with him. He worked under Bowles, which Bowles is one of the best defensive minds in the game. He was actually a defensive coordinator for the New York Jets for 4 years. Again, everybody's like, "Oh, wow, the New York Jets." He was a defensive coordinator, and now he's coming in to help out with our D line with all that experience. It sounds like, again, I read up on him. You don't find anything. You don't find any negatives on him. All the players, "Oh my God, I love him. Oh my God, I like this." So now you got a guy that's got some DC. He's got 30 years of experience. He's been under Bowles. He's been around the league, and again, his reputation as a D-line coach has been huge. And my thing is, this guy was the D-line coach and run game coordinator in Tampa Bay, and he just moved laterally. That's my gut feeling is. Now he probably has got a little bigger paycheck, or maybe they gave him a brand new Bronco or a Ford Mustang. But the point is, he moved because he knows Dan Campbell and he wants to, and they've somewhat, friends or acquaintances, and realizes I want to be a part of that. And Tampa's hasn't been doing bad. Tampa's, they're a freaking playoff team too. So I just think that's a bonus. That's a big one for us.
Yeah, I mean, losing, Terrell Williams was a bummer, but James, like Coach said, he took a lateral move to come here. That speaks volumes, and that's got to, encourage you a little bit as a fan, knowing the resume that he has that Coach just laid out there.
Yeah, and he was interviewed by the Packers too, and he chose the Lions. So I think that that's another big thing. He's got a resume that speaks for itself. He's been successful everywhere he's gone. The defense has been successful everywhere he's gone. He's coached with the Cowboys, with the Dolphins, the Jets, and now the Buccaneers for quite a while. And their defensive line has been very, very good. They never, because Todd Bowles was the head coach, he was kind of the de facto defensive coordinator, so they never really had anybody who was entitled the defensive coordinator. So I think it was pretty much Casey Rogers and Larry Foote who kind of did some of that assistant head coach stuff, or were kind of defensive coordinator, not really a name or anything like that, but Foles being the head coach couldn't do absolutely everything. So I think that they were kind of position coach plus guys. And Larry Foote came in and interviewed for that defensive coordinator spot too. And is
Yeah.
somebody that you could see maybe hired as the linebacker coach because they promoted Kelvin Shepherd from there. So now there's an opening for a linebackers coach. So I wouldn't be surprised if they announced a hire of Larry Foote as a linebackers coach to replace Kelvin Shepherd.
Yeah, great point. And you guys just brought this lateral move thing brought something up that we maybe haven't talked about as much. We know players want to come here and players are willing to come here sometimes for less money. It's also a coaching destination. Why would you not want to come here with the success the Lions have had? And you guys have brought that up, and you've seen now, hey, two great defensive coordinator, a defensive and offensive coordinator have both gotten jobs with other teams. And so it could be an opportunity for them to launch, James.
Yeah, I think, and Dan Campbell plays a big role in that he's building these guys to get promoted, whether it's in Detroit or whether it's somewhere else. He gives guys, I think, more I don't want to say experience, but more responsibility than I think a lot of coaches do, where we'll have some of these position coaches do press conferences, which that's something that you don't see a whole lot with other teams. And that's something that you're going to have to do eventually if you're a defensive coordinator. And having them lead practices a little bit more than a position coach might, or anything like that. The things that he's doing, the training that he's doing to get these guys the skills to move up is something that coaches see, and it makes Detroit a very desirable place to come for these assistant coaches.
That it does. And again, the opportunity to build them so that they can grow and they can succeed. Again, that's what leaders do. They make everybody around them better, Coach. What else do you want to weigh in on here with this move?
Hamilton, Lions assistant linebacker coach, they promoted him to the
Oh
linebacker.
yeah, that's right. I forgot about him. Yeah.
Yeah, Sean Dion
Yeah, Sean
Hamilton.
Dion Hamilton.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, he did. Yep.
And that's the thing is even you take Ben Johnson guys for a couple of years ago. I mean, you talk about promoting within and then bringing guys in. They promoted him. He took a shot on him, right? He's taking a shot on these guys right now. He may not offensive coordinator wise, but at least on the defense side of the ball. And I just think it shows what this coaching staff's all about. And you guys just said it. Guys are interviewing for other teams, but they're going, hey, I want to go coach there. Dan Campbell looks like a fun guy to hang out with.
Well, and let's talk about the big job, the on the defensive side, the defensive coordinator. I think Matt Eberflus is interviewing with Dallas right now. A lot of Lions fans wanted Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator. Looks like he went to San Francisco. But we all agreed, everybody agreed, if there's one in-house candidate for this job, it was Calvin Shepherd. Coach, one of our first episodes we talked about Calvin Shepherd on Hard Knocks, talking about Rodrigo. Okay. And, that was one of the first endearments, the first introductions to Calvin Shepherd. And that dude endeared himself to Dan Campbell. I mean, the fact that Calvin Shepard, I remember him talking about how he was considering getting a haircut because he wanted to fit in this box. And Dan Campbell basically said, don't you dare. He goes, be you and come build this team with us. And so, James, let's start with you. The promotion of Shepard. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, he was one of those guys, you don't often see assistant coaches becoming stars from Hard Knocks, but I mean, he was kind of one of those guys. I think it was him and Deuce Staley that outside of the coordinators got so much FaceTime during Hard Knocks. And yeah, I mean, he came up to Campbell and said, "Hey, should I cut off my dreadlocks to look more professional?" As a coach in the NFL, and Campbell was like, "No, be yourself." And I mean, he's got a pretty good resume if you look at it. He played in the NFL for quite a while. It was kind of a journeyman. He played his last season in the NFL for the Detroit Lions in 2018 as a backup linebacker, and then kind of stuck around with them. He went to LSU, back to his alma mater at LSU, and was a director of player development for a year. And then got a job back with the Lions as an outside linebackers coach, then moved that up to linebackers coach, and now up to defensive coordinator. So they obviously like him if he keeps getting promoted over and over again with this you know uh franchise. And it'll be interesting to see how much different he is than Aaron Glenn.
For sure. Now, Coach, you, give us some insights here on Shepard. I know you've followed this defense. You've broken down more film than Game Time James and I have probably watched combined. So you saw, the work that this linebacking crew did this year. If you just look at that story right there, that probably tells you a little bit by what he did within the defense based on the attrition they had with all those injuries. Does that kind of begin to show you the story of what he's capable of, or you talk, we'll listen?
I'll tell you, 6 weeks ago, guys, you remember I watched him weekly at his press conference when they did position stuff. And I told you guys, I said that guy is going to be a defense coordinator before long. You guys remember that? Because
Yep.
that he just his mannerisms, the way he handles himself, the way he talks. I mean, I could talk about an hour on him, but I'm going to try to condense it. Aaron Glenn talked about him weekly getting in front of the room. Okay, getting in front of the room. This is what the Lions do. They get in front of the room. It's not the offense coordinator. It's not the head coach. It's not the defense coordinator. It's not the special teams coordinator. Everybody gets in front of the room during a week and talks about stuff they're going to do. Talks about how they're going to attack. Talks about their ideas. That is just huge. Open the door up for a family to teach everybody what's going on. So those are positive things. I mean, when I listen to him, talking to him, his mannerisms, what he's done with that linebacking core, fitting guys into places. Let's go back to the Hard Knocks thing because I saw AJ Hawk talking about Shepard today. Of course, McAfee is just like, I love this hire, and it's about the dreads and everything. But the Hard Knocks, he was pointing out a fact. He was putting it on the line. Why is a 6th-round draft pick playing over you? Why is he doing the things right? He was challenging his rooms, but he was also telling him that it was no disrespect to you, Rodrigo. Keep doing what you're doing and please start. But no disrespect for what you do. You just keep pushing these guys. And if these guys aren't going to take it over, then guess what, Rodrigo? You're the starter and we'll go find another backup. And I think look what Rodrigo's done. He started, he came back in last year. Then this year, it got bigger because of injuries, and then of course he got injured. But look at how well he played in certain games. Trevor and AJ Hawk was talking. He said, "I would want to play for a guy like that." And AJ Hawk was a pretty good linebacker, guys, for the Green Bay Packers. I think he holds their career tackle record. And he said, I would want to play for a guy like that because he's hard nosed and he's truthful and he's not blowing any smoke. And that's what you want as an NFL player. And so off of those things, Trevor Nowaski, I know Trevor, as you guys know, Trevor and I talked about him 2 years ago. I said, how's your linebacker coach? He said, the dude is crazy. He's on you. He's on you nonstop, but man, do I love playing for him because he is teaching nonstop on how to be the best person you are at that position. Did we get a great hire? Saul and all those guys, I saw all them, and I know everybody wanted them. I was crossing my fingers going, please keep him. The other reason is he's a younger guy. You know he's going to draw up some stuff. And I'll guarantee he's watching what Spags did last night against the Buffalo Bills, and he's going to come up with that corner blitz. And God, was that a great call. Go get it, Shep. Let's go. Let's get this done. So I am extremely, as you can tell, excited about this hire, or move up, I should say, promotion.
Yeah, promotion, right? The hire within. I mean, like you said, he's being honest and upfront and challenging the players head on. We saw that back at Hard Knocks. And coach, this defense already had so many improvements that it's nice that we've got somebody in-house that's going to keep the continuity with it versus change the system, because look at the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Remember how well our defense was playing. We don't need to change the system much. Obviously, you always need to evolve and grow, but yeah. So I'm really excited for this. I like the move as well, and Dan Campbell knows exactly what he's getting in this player, James. What else do you want to weigh in on?
Oh yeah. Well, actually, what's interesting is Kelvin Shepherd played for Dan Campbell
Yeah.
for a season. I mean, which is amazing. When he was with the Dolphins, the year that Dan Campbell was the interim head coach, Kelvin Shepherd was a backup linebacker on the Miami Dolphins, and the year before. So when Campbell was the tight ends coach, so he's known him for quite a long time. So he's a guy that he just has kept bringing along with him and kept bringing him up and up and up and up, and he's gotten better and better. I think he's going to be a great hire as a defensive coordinator. But man, him and Campbell go back a lot farther back than people think.
Well, that's perfect timing for that, because I called him a player, and he was a player and a coach with Campbell. So, yeah, that's a history right there. And I tell you, that is telling you know somebody. And if you don't have a good history, you're not getting that promotion. So that should also be optimistic and exciting for Lions fans with this move. Coach, you want to weigh in here before we go to the interview?
Yeah, I want to touch on Hamilton a little bit. You guys know Hamilton played for the Lions, right? The linebacker coach.
Sean Dion Hamilton.
Yes. Okay. He played. So I was just reading this thing on him because I wanted to catch up on him. So in 2022 at camp, they called players out and they told them they wanted them to come out and make defensive play calls at practice. Okay. Well, Hamilton ended up getting cut, but he said, while he was eventually released at cut down, his impressed the coaching staff with his awareness and intelligence so much that coach Dan Campbell offered him an assistant linebacker role on the spot. Guys,
wow.
I'm loving it. Just write this stuff down. I'm loving this stuff.
That is great. Awesome insight. Nice find there.
Yep.
Now, guys, as you know, I had the opportunity to speak with Dan Miller from Fox 2 Detroit. He's the sports director there, and he's also, of course, the voice of the Detroit Lions, doing play-by-play on the radio. The first part of his interview was in our previous episode where we recapped the 2024 season. Here's the rest of that interview as it pertains to the coaching changes and moving forward. Let's take a quick look ahead, Dan. There's so much energy. There was so much coming into this season, right? Off that success of the NFC Championship game. But they had the playoff loss, and now you've got Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, both coordinators, going to different places. Some other assistants have gone as well. And this is new to Lions fans, right? Usually we're used to coordinators being dismissed, not poached off of our teams. And so how do you think this might affect the team?
Well, it's the price of success. I mean, it's, when you have the kind of success that the Lions have had and build the kind of organization that the Lions have had from the bottom up, teams want to emulate that. They want a piece of that. I mean, we've seen in the past, heck, there's several former Detroit front office guys in Washington right now helping to rebuild that thing. And then I'm sure they're doing a great job there, because look what that team was able to do, to go from, 4-13 to being in the playoffs and getting in the NFC Championship game. So this is part of it. And we knew at some point Ben Johnson was going to take a job, and we knew at some point Aaron Glenn was going to take a job. So it's no different than it is with players. It is next man up for coaches. And I think Dan Campbell has proven he knows how to form a staff. He had a good one when he got here. He's had to make some changes along the way. The changes that he's made have seemed to be the right ones. So I think you give him the benefit of the doubt. Look, we know some of these guys that have left, and we know some of the guys that are coming in. And, you know, Kelvin Shepherd is a guy that I think anybody who's ever spent any time with him believed was a defensive coordinator in waiting. And he has to prove himself because we haven't seen him in that role. But as I said, you know, the other day on X, he checks all the boxes. He's a leader. He's charismatic. Players get better under him. So I'm excited to see what he can do. And I'm excited to see what he can do with a healthy defense next year, which is something that Aaron Glenn didn't have this year. And then offensively, if it's Morton, look, that tells me Dan Campbell knows him because he was here and he's been with him before that. And that tells me, based on what Dan Campbell said, that he was going to get input from Jared Goff, that Jared feels good about it. So if it is, in fact, him and it looks like it is, then there's two guys that I believe, based on reading the tea leaves, are obviously signing off on this that play a big role in it and have worked with him before. So I think that's probably a good sign. So these guys, Ben Johnson's not taking the players and Aaron Glenn's not taking the players. And that's the strength of this team, you know, that you look at on paper and say, they got some really good players. We know they've had some really good coaches. The trick is now making sure that coaching staff stays, you know, at a very, very strong level where it's been in the past. But I think TJ said it the other day on X. It's like NFL's about the players. And I'm not trying to diminish the coaches because they are important. But let's remember, these coaches that are coming in are inheriting this roster that we talked about being loaded.
For sure. And again, with Dan Campbell being there, you talked about him building up that coaching staff, him and Brad building up that roster year after year. It is you said it, it's a stacked roster. I think it's exciting for a lot of Lions fans to see Kelvin Shepherd get this promotion. They got introduced to him on Hard Knocks a few years ago. And, you know, you talked about him developing not just players, but also coaches. So it seems like this is not just a great opportunity, but an opportunity that he's been building for multiple years in a row now.
Yeah, I think so. And look, he's young, and this is a huge opportunity for him. And, you know, I trust Dan Campbell to know when he's ready. And like I said, he has to prove himself in terms of, you know, filling the shoes of Aaron Glenn and calling the plays and being the one who designs everything on that defense as the part, opposed to being a part of it. And he was obviously involved significantly before this, but I think fans are really going to like him. I think fans are really going to respond to him. He is, you know, he catches your attention when he's up there. He knows how to talk the game, and he certainly knows how to sell the game and sell his players on the game and sell his players on the game plan. And I think it's exciting. And look, that offense, they're bringing back a ton of pieces. And again, there will be change. This is somebody who doesn't call a game exactly as Ben does. And sometimes change isn't the worst thing in the world. We'll have to wait and see. And I think this offense will continue to operate at a very high level. And that's not to diminish anything that Ben did, because obviously he's been outstanding. But I like the roster, and the roster is what they'll send out there on Sundays.
For sure. And, you know, you talked about Dan and just the role he's had with all of this. You know, there's people who aren't even Detroit Lions fans that are Dan Campbell fans. And so I feel that we are so fortunate to have him as our head coach. He just seems to be the authentic person on TV as in real life. I had the opportunity to interact with him from a distance at a Lions game back in 2022. They were 1-6. So that was his second season. It was the Packers game. It wasn't en vogue to dress up as Dan Campbell for Halloween, but I did it that year anyway. And I yelled to him from the sideline. My voice carries, and I caught his attention, and I got him to, you know, laugh and wave when I told him what I did. But are there any insights that, you know, interactions you've had with Dan that you could just maybe tell the listeners about, where, again, it just maybe reinforces or just tells one more side of the story of the guy that a lot of people have come to endear?
Yeah, he's just incredibly consistent. I mean, what you see is exactly what you get, and he doesn't change. It doesn't matter if you're at a press conference, sitting and talking with him, one-on-one situations, which, you know, is in my role. I have several of each week. There's just, it starts with this: he's a good person. And there's a consistency to that ability that he has to project that I think resonates with people. not just players, but with people, because you sense that he is a sincere person that means exactly what he says. And I see the way he interacts with people. It never changes. I've never seen him get irritated or angry at somebody or lose his cool. He just finds a way to kind of smooth out situations. And he is charismatic. He's a leader. He is somebody that players want to play for. He's smart. He understands the game. He understands offense and defense and special teams. He knows how to empower his coaches and empower his players. And he just checks the boxes for being a leader and a coach. And I just think, we've seen him develop. And I know sometimes people ask about, going for fourth down and doing things like that. The league is moving more in the direction of Dan Campbell than Dan Campbell is moving back to the league. And you see that with Washington, and you see that with other teams, that teams are now looking at this thing and saying, we need to take some risks here and empower our offense if we believe that's the best unit we have. And I think that is the best unit for Washington, and I think that is the best unit for Detroit. And if he has the ability to put the ball in Jared Goff's hands, he's going to do that. And that's where he trusts it. So I just think if I had to describe him, I would say consistent, fair, and just a good person. And I think that comes through. And that's important because players read that. That consistency is important because if players don't see that, if they see a guy that changes or says one thing to them, then says something else behind their back, man, that they sniff that out in a second. And there's none of that with Dan Campbell.
That makes a lot of sense. And we've been saying it on our show for a couple of years. When I interviewed Chick Hernandez before the Washington game, and we were talking about the aggressiveness on fourth down, I said, I think Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions have been changing the NFL because they've been going for it before more people. And, a lot of people were heavily criticizing him for it, but I think some people started realizing, wait a minute, there's a method to his madness. It's not just random. And you are seeing the league play more Detroit Lions football, as I will call it. Because of that, it is calculated, and the Lions have benefited a lot from it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't have the numbers to back it up. It just seems from the eye test that we're seeing more of that and that teams are more comfortable doing that. And I just think it's at its core, if you're settling for 3 instead of scoring 7, it's going to hurt you. And I think that's one thing that Dan Campbell looks at, that he says, I don't want to kick field goals. If I have to, I will. But I want to score touchdowns. And I just believe he thinks this offense on the field gives him the best chance to win a game. And if he's got the opportunity to do that, he'll do that. And I think more often than not, that's the risk that you see him take is I trust my guys to get this 4th and 2 or 4th and 3 or whatever it is. And that's, obviously it served him pretty well this year in going 15-2.
For sure. Now, you may have already hit on this, but, you've seen this franchise through a variety of moments and personalities, and a lot's been said about the culture change from 4 years ago that arrived here. So do you have any message for Lions fans who might still be down after the way 24 ended as we start approaching, the offseason and start looking towards 2025?
Yeah, I listen, I'm down. I feel it. There's no doubt that it's disappointing. It's hard to watch these games being played when you thought that you'd be in them. So I don't know that I have anything magical that gets you over it, but what I would just say is this, and this is what I come back to is, and we touched it earlier, this team's loaded. This team has a ton of talent, and the future for this team is bright. It didn't work out this year, but the only thing you can do is come back next year, try to get it right. With this roster that I think is ready to obviously hit the ground running, and it will be healthier. You're getting some really important guys back, Aiden, Aleem at some point. There's some decisions that have to be made in some other spots. But if I had anything to say to a fan, hey, man, look, I feel you. That was brutal. And not how we thought this season was going to end. But you got no choice but to look forward and look down at that depth chart and all the young talent that's on there and all the talent period that's on there. And that's what is at the core of this team. When everybody lines up to go next year, you're still going to be in good shape with that roster moving forward.
That makes a lot of sense as well. Before I get you out of here, I have to say you've covered a number of Detroit Lions seasons football. Like you, I even covered that 2008 season. And so with this wide range of experiences, Is there a specific call you made during a game that sticks out like as a one or two top memory of your days of calling Lions games?
I mean, probably. I mean, there's a couple of them that Cliff Avril's pick six that got him in the playoffs in 2011, because you were 3 years removed from 0-16, and that was kind of putting you back on the map. The Vikings game with Golden Tate scoring in overtime. You know, pack the bags, start the plane. I just think that's one I hear about a lot. I mean, it's and then probably the Rams game, winning that playoff game, because it just meant what that meant and how long it had been, and to have playoff football in downtown Detroit, and all the storylines with Goff going against his former team and Stafford coming back, and all the emotion that was wrapped up in that. But more than anything, just what that game meant to Detroit, and what that game in that moment meant to win a playoff game finally, to get that monkey off your back, and to have it in front of those fans who finally got to enjoy it, and everybody at home and everybody,
Yeah.
that's a Lions fan everywhere. I think that moment will always stick with me.
I was at that game with my wife, and like before the game started, I said to her, and maybe it was after the game even, I said, it's only technically a wild card playoff game, but this is the greatest football game of my life. It had that feeling. It was that incredible. And so I echo a lot of those moments.
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, it was just, look, you needed that. You couldn't get to a second playoff win until you got the first one. And knowing that we had never had playoff football in Ford Field was, truthfully kind of gross. But to finally have it back and then to win and to just, I've said it 2 million times. The best part of my job is seeing fans happy, and I don't know that I've ever seen them happier than they were that night. And that was just really cool to be a part of, and to see all those people just be able to enjoy that was really, really impactful.
Awesome. Dan, is there anything I haven't asked you that you think fans should know about this team or the 2024 season, or anything to look forward to for next year?
I feel their pain. And I just, with, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and Sheila Hamp and that whole crew leading the way, I think we're all in good hands. It's not easy to get over that, but I think we've seen what they've done with this organization. And I think we believe that based on what we've seen, they can continue to grow it and get better. And you don't really have any choice. We can't sit here and wallow in this thing forever. So let's, load it up and go again at some point, try to get better this offseason and come back next year. If anybody else has another option besides that, tell me. That's the only one I can think of. So, you know what? Next year we'll be out there cheering for Jared and Jameer and Demo and Amon-Ra and Aiden and TA and all those guys and those amazing safeties we got in the back end of our defense with BB and Kirby. So, and Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone, and I don't want to leave anybody out, DJ Reader and that incredible offensive line and Sam Laporta. And am I leaving anybody out? I don't want to do that. Look, it's that whole crew. It's Bates and Fox and, Hogan Hatton. You got to have a snapper on everyone. So, just all those guys and my man Brock Wright. So listen, all of them. This is a good football team, and they'll be a good football team next year. And there will be a next year, and there will be training camp, and there will be excitement, and there will be a season opener, and all of this is going to start over again. And then what happened this year, maybe it drives them. We'll see. But whatever happens next year will happen on its own, and we'll move past this.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, sharing all those insights and great information about the Detroit Lions.
You got it. Thanks, man.
Again, so kind of Dan Miller to take that time to talk to us about the changes going on right there and what to look forward to as we start moving into 2025. You guys, there was so much energy coming into this season with the success of last year. And the Lions, we went 15-2, but that first round playoff loss really sucked some of that energy out as we left. And I want to ask you guys, with that happening and with the coaching changes that are taking place, how do you think that affects the offseason vibe among the fans and just, what's going on, maybe even the outside world viewing the Lions?
I think it's very good. The Lions hires have been guys who are respected around the league. I think it was when Sean Dion Hamilton was hired. I think somebody referred to him as somebody who was just a fast rising superstar in the waiting among coaches. So I think that the players got to be excited for these guys. Campbell continues his tradition of hiring guys who have played in the league at least somewhat. Hamilton played for Washington for a few years before he came to the Lions for that one season. And so I think that carries a lot of weight with the players, that these guys have played that. But I think a lot of people have brought that up too, that oh man, he just hires a lot of players to be coaches, whereas a lot of you see coaching staffs are guys who never really played or anything like that. And that doesn't mean they can't be good coaches, but being a player gives some instant credibility to the players. And ultimately, you have to have players on the field win the games for you.
Yeah, and they hold people accountable. That's the coaching staff too, because they have hired some former players to be coaches, and they didn't work out. Just like they've hired some non-former players, I'm sure, to be coaches that didn't work out. If it doesn't work out, they move on, and it can be best for both sides in some of those situations. Coach, we didn't great season, didn't end the way we wanted to, and now there's a bunch of coaching changes, which is the new reality because we haven't had this before. What is your thought process for the vibe going into the offseason?
Well, I think it's going back to the player coaches, guys that have played before. They can say, I did this, I was there, I've done this before. That's why I think they love Hank so much. He was a dog. So I think that's the biggest thing. You know what? As high as we have reached in this past year where we fell in the playoffs, this is just a great tweak. You're going to tweak players. You're going to move some players around. You're going to bring some new players in. You're not going to be able to sign some guys. Of course, we're getting a ton of guys off injury. And this is just one of those things where, hey, we have to tweak things a little bit. Oh my God, we lost both our coordinators. We still have how many guys under the age of 25, 26 are in the top 5 at their position? We still have all these great athletes. And I think this is one of those things where you make those little bitty tweaks, whether it's in the run game or the pass game or who's calling the plays and stuff like that. And that's going to only ignite it and push the envelope to where we want to go to. And I think that's one of the things that'll be interesting during OTAs, how this all falls into place. Of course, who we get in, but also sometimes it's you learn a ton from a loss. You learn way more from a loss than a win. And sometimes you have to change the chemistry on who's making play calls and stuff like that to reach your potential. And I think this is a blessing in disguise. And we'll talk about that this time next year. And you're going to go, dude, remember when you said that was a blessing in disguise?
There you go. Well, it was 4 years ago this month that the Detroit Lions hired Dan Campbell. And so, like we said, time flies when you're having fun. And, you're right. This is a new vibe going into the offseason, Coach, because we're at a new place, a new feeling. We didn't win in the playoffs, but we arguably reached new heights. We had more wins than we've ever had. We won back-to-back division titles. And we've had coaches taken from our team and not taken from our team, not dismissed from our team, because it's usually been the other way around. And so, there's going to be a lot of decisions to be made on the current roster, and there's going to be some more coaching adjustments. So we'll get into that going forward. But the vibe going into this offseason, going into next year is there should be a heck of a lot of optimism. And I'm already putting it out there. I already texted you guys. I think the 2025 NFL season opener on Thursday Night Football is going to be the Detroit Lions against the Super Bowl winner. It makes way too much sense. Again, I don't even know how far the NFL people are on working on that schedule, James, but that's just, and I know it's an early prediction, and if I'm wrong, I'll be wrong, but it seems so logical to me. The schedule release is months away yet. It hit me, though, when I was watching the conclusion of those championship games, and I was like, wait a minute. I think the Lions play both of these teams on the road, both Super Bowl-bound teams. I'm like, is there a better way to open the NFL season than a 15-2 Detroit Lions team playing one of these two teams? Because everybody wanted to see the Lions play Philly or Kansas City this year. They wanted to see one of those games, and they didn't get to either see them. So we'll see what happens. Coach, any final thoughts, anything you want to touch on before we get out of here, wrap this thing up?
No, it'll be interesting to see how we fill out the rest of that staff, and can't wait for all the injured guys to come back.
Sounds good. James, how about you?
I'm just looking forward to a nice playoff run. Detroit is a destination now for coaches, for players, for everything. So revel in that, and hopefully it translates to more playoff success next year, and hopefully a trip to the Super Bowl.
And that's the thing. We haven't felt this type of a disappointment before, right? Winning your division and doing this well again and having expectations high, but then you don't get the playoff wins. Well,
yeah.
There's a number of teams that haven't gotten as far as they wanted to in the playoffs. I'm happy we're in this conversation before. And with these coaching changes, I just want to reiterate, we still have Sheila, Brad, and Dan. And that is a core trifecta. And as of right now, we still have Chris Spielman. I don't think he's gone anywhere yet. So, that 54 is feeling pretty good. We got the core, we got the players, we're filling in the pieces, we're making adjustments. And coach, you said it before, Dan Campbell builds the players up so they can get promoted, and some of them are getting promoted within, and that just makes our team better. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find more episodes and content at notthesameoldlions.com. Tell your friends and family about the show. Look for us on social media. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.